Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic might get you a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but if you've been here before, you know that that's kind of my thing, because today we're going to be talking about, was it the Millennial Kingdom or has there been a cycle of resets? The topic of the Millennial Kingdom and the idea that we could now be living in the short season has been very popular recently, and I have been exploring it on my channel pretty in depth. I've talked about it quite a few times, but I'm still at the point where I try to look at everything from different angles. While I do firmly believe, I can say now that I firmly believe that the first resurrection already happened. I believe that it is when Jesus ascended after his crucifixion. I actually believe that was the start of the millennial kingdom. I do not, however, know if I still believe that we are specifically in the short season right now. I mean, we could be. I'm not going to say that it's an impossibility, but I'm exploring how that might not be the case. We have spent quite a bit of time, both here on my channel and on so many other channels, just discussing the idea that there was some sort of prior advanced civilization that lived here before. Something happened, something that is commonly called a mud flood, but we don't really know specifically what happened. And much of it has been attributed to the idea that the 1,000 years of Revelation 20 has already happened, and that Satan has already been loosed, and that he is now roaming the earth in the short season. One thing that I've been thinking about recently, though, is that God has passed judgment multiple times. Just in the Bible alone, he has passed judgment multiple times on nations or even the world when it was not following him. And the flood was certainly the first example, the first solid example that we have of that. And why did God send the flood? Well, he sent the flood because there was so much corruption on the earth. Man had evil in his heart all the time. So he saved a remnant. He saved Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives. And he basically had the entire earth start over again in a reset. Now, there are some who might argue that the gap theory, the time period between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 could also be considered a reset period. And I will concur that that is a possibility, but I'm just going to start, with the flood of Noah. And what is the next really big reset that you can think of when it comes to biblical terms? Well, for me, that will be the Tower of Babel. Let's read about the Tower of Babel and what happened. This is from Genesis 11, verses 1 through 9. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. So what do we have here in the Tower of Babel? We have these people building this tower up to the heavens. And if you read some of the extra biblical texts, it will actually tell you that they were trying to make war with God. There is much speculation that they were trying to break through the firmament. But what does it tell us right here in Genesis 11? It says, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." So what we have here is a civilization that was getting far too advanced for its own good, and far too evil for its own good. So what did God do? He broke up the people's languages. He destroyed the tower, and he made it so that they could no longer communicate with one another. In essence, there was a reset. They were just dispersed throughout the entire earth, and they no longer had what they had here. So in light of the story of the Tower of Babel and the idea of what some people call Tartaria, what some people call the millennial reign, I am starting to wonder if that may just have been the most recent in what seems to be a cycle of resets that, yes, may well be judgments of God on civilizations that have not just gone astray, but have almost gone past the point of no return, as they did in the Tower of Babel. Genesis 11 tells us that if they would continue on, they would be able to do anything. And if you think about where we are now in this period of history, and the fact that Ecclesiastes tells us that there is nothing new under the sun, I'm willing to bet that what we are looking at as Tartaria or the Millennial Kingdom was just another reset in a cycle of resets. So here's the verse specifically that I was referring to, and I will read it from the entire context here. It says, "All things are wearisome, more than one can describe. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear content with hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a case where one can say, 'Look, this is new'? It has already existed in the ages before us." Everything that has happened or will happen has already happened because we live in a cyclical world. Just because the canon is written in completion, I believe that the book of Revelation was written around 65 AD, give or take a few years. So if that was the last book written in the Bible, that does not mean that God has not been judging nations as time goes on, especially if Jesus, when he ascended after his crucifixion, if he began the millennial kingdom, which I am starting to believe may have been a spiritual kingdom rather than a physical one. I have been studying up on full preterism, and I plan on doing a video on my takeaways from it within the next week or two, hopefully. I just happened across this website today. This is not a preterist website, I don't believe. I'm not sure. It might be post-millennial, but I did find some parts of it interesting. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. I have not even, I scanned this article, but I haven't deeply read the entire thing yet. But I did find some things that were pertinent to this topic that I'm talking about with you today. And this is going over Revelation, and it's called The Book of Revelation Made Clear.com. So it tells us John sees an angel, and it's talking about Revelation 20, verses 1 to 3. John sees an angel coming down from heaven. In his hand is the key to the abyss, bottomless pit, and a great chain. We read about the abyss in Revelation 9:1, where we saw Abaddon, Apollyon, Satan, open the abyss and release locusts. These locusts represented Satan unleashing the Roman Empire as the destroyer of the Jewish nation. The angel seizes the dragon and binds him for 1,000 years. We are reminded that the dragon is Satan. Satan is thrown into the abyss, shut it, and sealed it for the 1,000 years. It is important to read the meaning of this binding. This is very important here. The binding means that Satan might not deceive the nations any longer. And that's specifically what it says in the passage. It says so that Satan will not deceive the nations any longer. So that's what the binding is. The binding means that Satan might not deceive the nations any longer. It is important to consider that the angel does not say that Satan is no longer deceiving people. Satan is the great deceiver and will continue to tempt people to sin until Christ returns. The angel is pointing to something different when we are told that Satan can no longer deceive the nations. What has Satan been doing in the book of Revelation that he will no longer be able to do for the 1,000 years? It seems evident from our study that the dragon has lifted up a world power to make war on those who follow Jesus and deceive the world to worship it rather than God. This is what the dragon has been causing in the second half of the book of Revelation. As Daniel prophesied in Daniel 2:44, the kingdoms of the earth have been brought to an end by the kingdom of God that shall never be destroyed. The deception of the nations by the dragon will be expanded on toward the end of this chapter. We also need to examine the 1,000-year period. As we have noted throughout our study, we are taking these numbers as symbols unless something in the text demands otherwise. There is nothing here to suggest that the 1,000 years are a literal 1,000 years. Further, the 1,000 years seems to be in contrast to what will happen after the 1,000 years. Satan will be released for a little while. Satan is going to be sealed in the abyss for a significant duration of time, while his release will be for a very short amount of time. We will be given more details about the 1,000 years in the next few verses. New Testament scholar G.K. Beale argues for the 1,000 years to be understood figuratively. The events in verses 1 through 3 and verses 4 to 6 occur during the same period, which is referred to as 1,000 years. That this is not a literal chronological number is apparent from 1. The consistently figurative use of numbers elsewhere in the book, 2. The figurative nature of much of the immediate context, the predominantly figurative tone of the entire book, the figurative use of 1,000 in the Old Testament, and the use in Jewish and early Christian writings of 1,000 years as a figure for the eternal blessing of the redeemed. The overall analysis of verses 1 through 6 supports a figurative meaning. 1,000 is the third power of 10, and if figurative here might represent a long era and at least would signify an ideal epoch. What if, and this is complete speculation, but what if we are still in the millennial kingdom where Jesus is reigning from heaven with the saints? And that is why these resets keep happening over and over again. And I will just share some verses that I came across that will better explain what I could ever explain about this. So the Bible tells us that when Jesus is reigning, he will continue reigning until he puts all his enemies under his feet. All of them. So 1 Corinthians 15:25, for he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. Psalm 110:1, a psalm of David. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Hebrews 10:12 and 13. But he, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time onward until his enemies be made a footstool for his feet. Now I'm going to read the rest of these, but I just want to interject here. What is one possible way that he could put these enemies under his feet? By resetting the entire civilization. And yes, because it has happened. It wasn't even just the flood. It wasn't even just the Tower of Babel. You know, you can even think of Sodom and Gomorrah as a reset. You can think of, some people think of the days of Peleg as a reset. Certainly the fall of Jerusalem was a reset. And that is most likely when the book of Revelation happened. And that is what this is telling us. Jesus needs to put his enemies over his feet, and he is going to do that as he is reigning. And when is he reigning? For those 1,000 years, which, yes, I have been guilty of it too. I have been looking at it literally, when in fact, it may not be literal at all. It might just signify a longer period of time. You know, my daughter, when she walked down the aisle, she used the song "A Thousand Years." And you know, what are the lyrics to that song? I have died every day waiting for you. Um, I have loved you for 1,000 years. And so if people in the future look back to the lyrics of that song, if they look at it literally, they'll think, wow, people were living at least 1,000 years while when this song was written. They really lived a long time. Well, that's not what the song means. Or, you know, like if your teenager is out in the car while waiting for you while you're in the grocery store and you run into some friends, and then you come out and your teenager is like, oh my gosh, mom, you were in there for 1,000 years. Were you in there really for 1,000 years? No, you were not. You were just to your teenager in there for a really long, extended period of time. So is it possible that we are living in that period? There have been a cycle of resets during that time period because Jesus is using those resets to put his enemies under his feet. And I'm sure that it's going to take a while to get rid of all of them. They're going to keep popping up, and I'm going to go through that in a little bit. But let's just read some more of these verses. Um, Ephesians 1:22, and he put all things in subjection under his feet and gave him as head over all things to the church. Hebrews 2:8, you have put all things in subjection under his feet, for in subjecting all things to him, he left nothing that is not subject to him. But now we do not yet see all things subjected to him. Matthew 22:44, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies beneath your feet. Luke 20, verses 42 and 43. For David himself says in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. I'm going to skip that one because it's very similar to this one, and we'll just go down to 1 Kings 5:3. You know that David, my father, was unable to build a house for the name of the Lord his God because of the wars which surrounded him, until the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. And there are more. There are more. And, I'm going to leave a link in the description if you wanted to read the rest of these. But I think that you get my meaning here. At least I hope you do. And so now one of the reasons that so many of us have believed that we are in the short season right now, and again, I'm going to say, yes, it is possible that we are still in the short season. I'm just looking at things from a different angle. I like to play devil's advocate in my research and in the way that I think about things. But the reason that people have been thinking of us as being in the short season right now is because it seems like we are getting past the point of no return. It is getting so bad. Everything is evil. The things that are being taught in school is evil. Everything is lies. And technology, yes, is taking us almost past the point of no return. So now we've got children addicted to screens. We've got this VR, virtual reality stuff, which is very likely going to condition people to be more likely to accept transhumanism or Neuralink, which we now know there are now human test subjects. Neuralink. And so what is going to happen to the people who start getting these links in their heads? Will their name be written in the book of life if they are no longer human? Are we getting to the point where the Tower of Babel was, where we are getting to the point of no return? And are we headed to another reset? I'm starting to think that it is very possible. So what of the inheritors and the insane asylums, and what happened to the people? Did God wipe out everyone, including the good people, during these resets? Again, I don't know. These are all speculations, but we have to look to the flood. God saved a remnant. He saved a remnant of his people. And so I have to believe that that is what, if these resets have been orchestrated by the Lord, I have to believe that he has also saved a remnant just as he did with the flood. We see so many photographs of the beautiful architecture of a civilization that was here before, and we just can't understand it. We just can't put our finger on it for the history that we're told, how these people were able to create the things that we see right in front of us. Now, yes, these buildings are being torn down left and right. Places have been bombed, called fires, maybe even arsons, but I think that it would be really hard to burn entire brick cities. I think something else definitely happened, but there has been a huge cover up. And I think that this could be why. And so very often what we like to remark is that when we're watching these things, especially when you're watching the old films of, maybe like 1900s, people seem so out of place, like they just don't seem like they fit in with their surroundings. And so one thing that I'm thinking is, could these people have been some of the remnant? Could some of them have been some of our controllers too? I'll get to that in a minute. Um, who knows how long cleanup would have taken after these events? We see photographs with just mud everywhere. So we're not really sure at this point in time. We've been even talking about, we don't really know where we are on the timeline. We just honestly have no idea. But when you see photographs like this, there must have been an extensive cleanup period for this time. So when we do see people who kind of seem out of place, you have to wonder, where were they and how long have they kind of been shut away from the real world? Now, as for those who would kind of be the people who like to consider themselves to be the elite or the controllers, or dare I say, Nephilim bloodline, I'm thinking of a verse in Revelation here. So again, I'm going to read the context passage over here. And so it'll be Revelation 6, verses 14 through 16. And it says, "The sky receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the commanders, the rich, the mighty, and every slave and free man hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, 'Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb.'" So there already is a history of people using the mountains, the rocks, the caves, and dare I say, the underground to hide from these things. And it tells us the kings of the earth, very likely Nephilim blood. The nobles are very likely Nephilim blood. The commanders, the rich, Nephilim blood. It even tells us every slave and free man. And again, I mentioned, I don't know where the remnant would have been, if there was a remnant, but could they also have been hiding in these places too? Although if they were a remnant, now this is not specifically referring to every reset, but I'm thinking that this is certainly gives an idea of where they would have been hiding. And indeed, we do have these underground places all over the world. This is Darren Kuyu, and it was said that it was a complete underground city. So is this something that the I'll still continue to call them the controllers, that they may have set up for themselves because possibly they knew that these resets happen time and time again. And if they have the resources and the money to do these things to protect themselves, just as the elite do, I call them the elite because that's what they think they are. That's not what I think they are. But look at them now. They're building bunkers now. They're building under facilities now. They know that something is coming. They know it. And so here we have a deep underground military base. These aren't new things. These are structures that have been there for who knows how long. They're shelters, and they have likely been used again and again and again. And if you think about it regarding the underground, what is something that I have talked about here on my channel? I have talked about the fact that what we have been brought up to, think of as fairies, the fairy bloodline, the elven bloodline, the dragon bloodline of Vlad the Impaler. These were all Nephilim bloodlines. Okay? And so if you think of so many of these creatures, like the elves and the fairies and the gnomes, and so many of these creatures that have ties to the realm of the Nephilim or the Nephilim, where are a lot of them said to live? Well, a lot of them are said to have gone underground. Could that be why they're underground? Because that is where they're safe. So, these are my thoughts on this topic. And I told you that I would probably take you a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But I'm not one of those people who is willing to, especially when it comes to eschatology, to look at something and say, okay, I've got it all figured out. Bam, I'm done looking into it. Let's move on to something else. I'm a deep thinker, and so I'm going to keep studying and studying and studying. And I'm going to look at things from all different points of view. And yes, and I'm still going to be the first one to tell you that I'm not going to 100% tell you if we are in the short season. I am not going to 100% tell you if we are still living in the 1,000 years where Christ is reigning and is putting his enemies under his feet through these cyclical resets. A cycle that the word tells us will happen. There is nothing new under the sun. It's just an idea that I had. Now, next week, the article that I shared with you today that just said a little bit about Revelation 20, I'm going to go through that a little bit deeper. But as I mentioned before, I am going to share with you what my thoughts are on full preterism, because at this point in time, I would probably consider myself to be a partial preterist, maybe, because I do believe that Christ already ascended. He is already on the throne right now. And whether we're in the short season or whether we're still in the midst of the millennial kingdom, you know, he's there. He's on the throne. And so, yeah, I'm going to share what my misgivings are about full preterism I won't say next time, but soon. Just because I do find it very interesting, but I have some questions about full preterism that they just can't adequately explain. But anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page or my YouTube membership, I will leave links for those in the description box as well. And I hope you have a great day.